Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're stepping away from, the big battle scenes, the clashing swords and all that. Instead, we're looking at something maybe quieter, but honestly, maybe even more intense. We're heading right to the Tower of Orthanc to really break down that incredibly charged meeting between Gandalf and Saruman. It's all in that chapter, The Voice of Saruman.
Oh, absolutely. This is such a pivotal moment in the whole story, but it's quiet, isn't it? You've got the victory at Helm's Deep done. Isengard is basically rubble thanks to the Ents. And yet, when the heroes finally confront Saruman, they get pulled into this invisible battle. Our goal today, I think, is to unpack why this quiet face-off carries just as much weight, maybe more, than any physical fight.
That's the really fascinating part, isn't it? The paradox of it. You got Gandalf, Théoden, Aragorn, Éomer. They have the armies, they have the moral high ground. Clearly, they get to Orthanc. Saruman's basically a prisoner in his own tower, surrounded by the absolute wreckage of everything he built. And still, the book makes a point of saying no swords clash, no skulls fly.
Right. What Tolkien does here is he completely shifts the battlefield. It's not physical anymore. It moves entirely into the realm of psychology and rhetoric. We're watching words themselves become weapons. Saruman isn't just arguing. He's using his voice to dominate, to deceive. It shows how power can be wielded just as brutally through language.
And when you really dig into this chapter, it's so much more than just fantasy plot. It feels like a blueprint, almost, for understanding how manipulation works, how pride corrupts. That moment when sheer brilliance, intellect that was meant for good just tips over into moral decay. It's a chilling look at how persuasive evil operates.
And the timing is key. This happens right after Saruman's forces are crushed and the Ents have just laid waste to Isengard. The fortress is ruined. But Saruman himself, he's still up there, aloof in his indestructible tower. So the scene is set for some kind of final judgment. But the way it plays out is completely unexpected. It's all about this deep, psychological, almost spiritual confrontation, not just overpowering him physically. They need to strip him of his authority, fundamentally.
Yeah, exactly. And what we're about to see is the final, definitive spiritual implosion of one of Middle-earth's most brilliant minds. And the tragedy is, it's entirely self-inflicted. Let's start with the scene itself, the physical setting. Because the environment around Orthanc, wow, it speaks volumes about Saruman's fall before he even utters a word. The descriptions paint this picture of an eerie calm, the whole plain flooded, those Ents standing guard like ancient, silent judges, and just broken machines everywhere, smoking ruins, desolation. The landscape is the evidence. It's a direct testimony to his catastrophic arrogance and, the inevitable collapse that follows.
Right.
The scale of the destruction, those smashed pits, the flooded caverns where the Uruk-hai were bred, the forests he destroyed, it's all physical proof of his moral rot. Saruman poured all his genius, his immense talent, into creating war machines, industry, valuing this quick engineered power over the kind of patient natural wisdom he was supposed to represent. And the irony is just crushing, isn't it? The Ents, ancient, slow, deeply connected to nature, they're the ones who brought down his industrial might. That must have stung Saruman deeply.
Oh, absolutely. It's the perfect symbolic rebuttal to his entire philosophy. He thought he could harness industry, forging, breeding, mass production to win faster, more efficiently than sticking to, moral alignment. The Ents embody those enduring, patient forces of nature and morality that he completely scorned. Their destruction of his works just throws his massive miscalculation into sharp relief. He tried to swap out genuine wisdom for, mechanical complexity.
Which brings us right to the core of his fall, doesn't it? Symbolically, he's the ultimate cautionary tale about intellect completely cut off from morality. His brilliance, the very thing that made him chief of the wizards, it just curdled into pure destructive arrogance. He genuinely thought he was smarter than the moral rules he was meant to uphold.
Exactly. And what's so striking is that his failure isn't about a lack of knowledge or skill. He had tons of that. It's a failure of will, of character. Remember, as one of the Istari, these mare spirits sent to guide Middle-earth, his specific job was to resist the temptation of pride and domination. So he becomes this powerful, chilling symbol of how power itself corrupts. He just abandoned his mission. His authority became the goal, not the tool, and that led him straight into serving the very evil he was sent to fight.
And you see it so powerfully in his appearance when he finally shows himself. He's still up there, robed in white, trying desperately to project this image of former majesty. But those robes, They were meant to signify purity, his high station, right? Now they just look like a costume for his pride. He's clinging to the outward symbol while everything in his purpose, his loyalty, his very soul is just rotted away.
Yeah, and his insistence on wearing white, which, remember, he later twists into being many colors to justify his betrayals. It really represents the failure of any authority, spiritual or otherwise, that gives in to that fatal pride. He's the false white. His arrogance made him think he could control the darkness instead of opposing it, which just left him wide open to Sauron's influence. And this sets up that perfect, stark contrast with Gandalf, who takes his place precisely because Gandalf suffered, learned humility, and chose integrity over just being the smartest guy in the room.
So even before anyone speaks, the whole scene is shouting that Saruman is defeated.
Yes.
Physically, strategically, but he still has one weapon left, one very dangerous weapon. Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. The chapter isn't called The Fall of Orthanc or Saruman's Defeat or something physical. It's named very specifically after his last and arguably most potent tool, the Voice of Saruman.
That title is a huge clue, isn't it? It signals immediately that we're dealing with something uniquely dangerous, something deeply psychological. And the way Tolkien describes his speech, it's almost supernatural. The voice is described as smooth, seductive, hypnotic. It has this uncanny ability to just disarm you, make you forget why you were angry, make you question your own certainty.
That's a key distinction, right? It's not just about being a good speaker. Lots of villains can be eloquent. But if Saruman's power here is all in his voice, why doesn't the fact that Isengard is a smoking ruin around him just shut him down immediately? Doesn't the physical reality undercut the rhetoric?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it doesn't, because his voice isn't really aiming at your reason. It's targeting your will. It's a tool for control. His words aren't just trying to persuade you on, like, a logical point. They're specifically designed to sway your deepest convictions, your moral compass. It reveals this fundamental desire he has for domination through deceit. He uses language not to find truth, but purely to exert his personal power over other people's minds.
And this is how he tries to paper over the cracks, right? To hide the fact that he's spiritually bankrupt. That smooth, proud exterior, the remnants of his old majesty. It's all just a highly polished mask for the decay underneath.
Exactly. And you see it work chillingly when he speaks to Théoden. He comes down the stairs, not yelling or threatening, but presenting himself as someone deeply wronged. His tone is like a kindly counselor, maybe a wounded mentor. He sidesteps the huge betrayals and uses flattery half-truths, painting himself as misunderstood, betrayed by impulsive men.
He basically tries to reframe everything, killing Théoden's riders, destroying Rohan's forest, unleashing the Uruk-hai as just, difficult but necessary strategic moves.
Precisely. He's trying to justify evil using reason, making his atrocities sound like complex, pragmatic choices that simpler folk like Théoden just couldn't grasp. He says things that contain kernels of truth, mixing legitimate complaints with these monstrous lies. And for a second, even Théoden, the king who suffered directly because of Saruman's treachery, standing right there amidst the ruins, he wavers. That hesitation is genuinely terrifying. It shows just how effective this kind of sophisticated manipulation can be. The physical proof of Saruman's evil is right there, but his voice almost makes them ignore it.
And that really hammers home the wider theme, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That persuasive evil doesn't always roar. It can whisper. It can charm. It often hides behind things we actually value, like reason, eloquence, intelligence. It doesn't look like the enemy. It sounds like the smart, rational, maybe even practical choice.
Yeah, it's really important to draw that contrast. Saruman's voice isn't the shriek of a dictator or the clumsy lies of some petty crook. It's the soft, manipulative tone of a deceiver. Someone who thrives on half-truths, on appeals to intellectual superiority. It's insidious. He doesn't order you to serve evil. He suggests that maybe evil is just the most logical, most efficient way forward. That his terrible actions were just necessary steps towards some greater, more complex goal only he understands.
That distinction, the shriek versus the whisper, that's why this confrontation feels so relevant, so weighty. It forces the characters, and us, the readers, to grapple with the most deceptive kinds of malice, the kind that tries to convince us it's actually progress or just smart thinking.
And that's the moment Gandalf has to intervene, not just as another speaker, but as an absolute moral counterforce. Saruman's web of words can only be broken by an authority that operates completely outside his flawed, corrupted logic. Right, so when you're faced with that kind of soft, hypnotic manipulation, the only effective response has to come from a place of, well, unshakable truth. Not more force, but just clarity. This is where Gandalf the White fully steps into his power. He stays perfectly calm, totally unwavering. He establishes his superior moral authority by choosing clarity, wisdom, restraint, not domination, not force. His whole approach is a victory for moral clarity.
It's incredible because Gandalf isn't immune. The text says even he feels the pull of Saruman's voice.
Yeah.
But he's grounded by the integrity that Saruman completely abandoned. He doesn't try to outlogic Saruman's twisted arguments. He just uses his authority to instantly expose the rot under the surface. Cuts right through the seductive words to the moral failure itself.
Exactly. Gandalf speaks to him almost like a judge speaking to a criminal who refuses to admit guilt. He cuts through all the fancy language, the sophisticated justifications. He reminds Saruman of his real name, his original purpose, and how utterly he betrayed the mission given by the Valar.
Which leads to that incredible defining moment, that command, delivered with such absolute certainty. Come down, Saruman. The text says it echoes like divine judgment. It's not just a physical command. It's a demand for moral surrender, isn't it?
Precisely. Gandalf gets it. He knows Saruman's power now relies entirely on maintaining this illusion of control, of superiority. If Saruman comes down, he gives up that illusion. So Gandalf wins the psychological battle, not with stronger magic, but with clarity, faith, and that moral restraint. It demonstrates the total triumph of wisdom over corrupted intelligence. Gandalf makes it crystal clear. Real authority stems from integrity, not just rank or how much you know.
But Saruman, true to form, completely fails this last test. He clings to his pride, literally clings to the top of his tower, and refuses to come down. Instead, he lashes out with this final, spiteful burst of rhetoric, just cursing Gandalf and everyone there.
Yeah, his last words are just bitter, desperate attempts to wound, but they don't have that old hypnotic power anymore because Gandalf's clarity has, broken the spell. And when Saruman definitively refuses that final spiritual command, Gandalf performs the action that seals his fate. He declares Saruman cast out of the Order of Wizards, out of the Council, and then he breaks his staff.
That moment, breaking the staff, it's so much more than just snapping a stick, isn't it? It feels like the symbolic judgment suddenly becomes real, binding, cosmic even. Why is that the act that finally strips him of power?
Because those staffs weren't just walking sticks. They were the focus, the conduit for the Astari's power, given to them by the Valar when they came to Middle-earth. They symbolize their actual rank and authority within that divine order. So by declaring Saruman cast out, and then physically shattering the symbol and focus of his power, Gandalf acting now as the true head of the order, Gandalf the White is basically enacting an irrevocable spiritual judgment. Saruman isn't just a defeated enemy anymore, he's spiritually nullified, reduced, truly, to just a bitter, powerless old man trapped by his own choices.
And this act, it doesn't just diminish Saruman, it elevates Gandalf completely.
Yeah.
This is the moment that cements his transformation into Gandalf the White. He is now the undisputed spiritual leader.
Absolutely. He inherits that mantle of true white because he succeeded where Saruman failed. He never abandoned humility, he never sought to dominate, he went through death and rebirth, proving himself worthy of the authority he now wields. The one whose pride led to his fall is replaced by the one whose humility and suffering prepared him for true leadership.
So connecting this to the bigger picture then, Gandalf's victory here isn't just over Saruman the individual. It's a victory over that seductive, dangerous idea that knowledge alone grants authority. Saruman had the knowledge, the highest rank, the intellectual chops. Gandalf had the integrity. And in the end, integrity proves to be the real, enduring power.
It really is the triumph of character over intellect, humility over hubris. The Astari mission is kind of saved, or at least recentered. But the fallout from Saruman's actions, that's not quite over yet.
Right, so the main conflict seems resolved. The spiritual power lines are redrawn. The good guys have won this crucial moral victory. Everyone's probably ready to, move on. But then, just as they're about to leave, this small, almost pathetic incident happens that kicks off the next massive problem. We suddenly focus on Wormtongue, Saruman's wretched servant, still hiding up there, full of petty spite.
Yeah, it's such a classic Tolkien move, isn't it? This seemingly random, minor act that triggers enormous, completely unforeseen consequences. Wormtongue hears them talking about Saruman's fate below, and in this fit of useless rage, he throws something heavy down at them. He's aiming for Gandalf, probably just hoping to hurt him out of pure malice. It's the last gasp of bitterness from Orthong.
And this heavy object, it crashes onto the steps, apparently shatters them, but somehow the object itself remains intact. And Gandalf immediately identifies it. It's the Palantir, Saruman's Seeing Stone. I mean, the symbolism, this incredibly powerful ancient artifact, the very thing that corrupted Saruman is just chucked out like trash by his sniveling lackey.
The irony is definitely thick there, and the consequences are immediate and huge. The text really stresses that this small, careless act sets off a chain reaction. It's a critical bridge leading straight into the return of the king. It feels like fate disguised as an accident, a really crucial narrative turning point.
Okay, so we need to unpack the Palantir a bit to really get the danger here. What exactly are these Seeing Stones? Why is suddenly having one so important and so dangerous?
Right. The Palantiri, the far-sighted ones, were ancient artifacts made by the elves way back in Valinor, brought to Middle-earth by the Númenóreans. Originally, they were tools for communication between the scattered kingdoms of the faithful, but over time, most were lost or hidden. Saruman, in his arrogance, found the one kept in Orthanc and started using it to spy, to gather information, thinking he was being clever. But the critical thing is, the Orthanc stone could connect with the other major surviving stone, the one Sauron had captured and was now using from Barad-dûr.
Ah, okay. So Saruman thought he was using this stone to get an edge, to gain knowledge, but really Sauron was using it to ensnare him. He was looking right into the Dark Lord's eye, essentially.
Exactly. The Palantir was the perfect trap for Saruman's particular weakness, his pride in his own intellect and his desire for secret knowledge. Sauron could easily dominate him through the stone, twist his perceptions, feed his fears and ambitions. Saruman was quickly compromised, his will overridden, effectively turning him into Sauron's pawn without him fully realizing the extent of it. So the stone itself is this potent symbol of corrupted knowledge and the danger of seeking power through forbidden channels. When Wormtongue throws it down, suddenly the Fellowship, or at least Gandalf, is in possession of this direct line, this unmediated communication device, straight to the Dark Lord.
And Gandalf, knowing exactly what this thing is and how dangerous it is, scoops it up immediately. He recognizes it's not a prize, it's a massive liability.
Huge liability, absolutely. The Palantir instantly becomes the connection between Saruman's contained corruption, which they've just dealt with, and Sauron's growing awareness of what the good guys are up to. That's a problem massively amplified. It introduces terrifying new stakes. And specifically, it sets the stage for poor Pippin later on. His curiosity gets the better of him, he looks into the stone, and boom, he's face to face with Sauron's gaze, inadvertently spilling critical secrets about Frodo and the quest.
So this whole confrontation at Orthanc has this brilliant double effect. First, it definitively takes Saruman off the board as a major player. Spiritually and physically, he's neutralized. But second, it immediately hands the heroes this new, incredibly dangerous problem of the Palantir, which guarantees the stakes are going to ramp up immediately in the next phase of the story.
It's the perfect transition. The spiritual power dynamic is reset. Saruman's out, Gandalf is clearly in charge, but the whole mood shifts. It's not about celebrating the military win anymore. Now it's about intense spiritual vigilance. The physical threat from Isengard is gone, but the danger has evolved. It's become more immediate, more psychological, more pervasive. They have to be more careful than ever.
And the fact that this critical plot device, this huge new danger, enters the story because of Wormtongue's petty act of spite. Well, that's a powerful statement too, isn't it? About how huge consequences can flow from the smallest, meanest impulses.
So if we pull it all together, this confrontation at Orthanc wasn't just some minor cleanup operation. It really was the moral centerpiece of the Two Towers. It was a masterclass in how words can be weapons. And it was the absolute defining struggle between that toxic intellectual pride of Saruman and the genuine humility and wisdom we see in Gandalf.
Yeah, you really have to appreciate Tolkien's skill here. How many writers can make a conversation, basically two people talking on a balcony, feel as tense and high stakes as a full-blown siege? It's a true psychological duel. It has the feel of those ancient mythic clashes, like Lucifer and Michael, beings of the same order divided by their ultimate moral choices.
And his linguistic talent just shines through. Saruman's voice, that honeyed, deceptive rhetoric, Théoden's flicker of doubt, which feels so real, and then Gandalf's sudden, commanding authority that cuts through it all. Each voice is perfectly distinct, perfectly pitched within that grand mythic style he uses. It makes sense why the chapter is named after the weapon that ultimately failed Saruman, his deceptive voice.
This whole deep dive, it really reminds us that, yeah, physical wars end, walls fall down. But the deeper battles, the spiritual ones, the fights over will, over corruption, over who gets to define what's true, those keep going. Saruman's voice, it thrived on those half-truths, didn't it? On reason, completely disconnected from morality, trying to sell betrayal as just efficiency or maybe pragmatic leadership.
The core warning seems pretty clear. Brilliance, if it's not anchored to integrity, can easily become just another tool for oppression. Sauron's fall is a stark picture of how the desire for control, even if it's dressed up as research or efficiency, leads eventually to ruin and shame. But Gandalf's response, that offers the alternative, right? That real authority shows itself through clarity, consistency, and just sticking to the moral truth, even when the smart or pragmatic path looks easier.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe chew on. If Saruman's method is that soft, manipulative whisper, the voice of expertise without ethics, what's our equivalent of Gandalf's moral clarity that we need today? Where do we see sophisticated, eloquent arguments trying to justify things that feel morally wrong in our own world? And how do we get better at spotting the rot under those intellectual white robes before we get charmed by the voice?
Recognizing the sound of that whisper, that manipulative tone, that's probably the first, most crucial step towards finding our own clarity.
Definitely food for thought. That was the deep dive.